I've been on about 4 or 5 different types of sleeping pills and none of them help. That's how bad the nightmares are. I prefer not to sleep, not dream about it, than sleep and just see the picture in my head.
Hey, Roger, detect, passing our location. Keep going,
And everybody's like, oh, you're going to the Korengal? Oh, and they feel sorry for you. Deadliest place on earth, the Korengal Valley.
We're not ready for this.
I'm thinking, what are we doing?
Well, the anti-war, pro-war conversation or argument is an important one, and it's based on information from the full spectrum of news reporting, television and newspaper, that happens in a place like Afghanistan. And one of the things that Tim and I noticed was that the people who are actually fighting the war that is being argued over, and should be argued over, those people are maybe the only people in the country who actually aren't focused very much on those issues. Very much like policemen or firemen, they're doing a very dangerous job, and they're not particularly focused on the political or social issues around that job. And we wanted to make a movie that allowed you to understand and almost experience their reality, the emotional consequences of combat. And if they had sat around at Restrepo talking about the politics of the war, the way they probably did more of that in Vietnam, because there was a draft army, and the decisions of the U.S. government put those men in those outposts. In this case, it's not a draft army. What put those men in those outposts was their personal decision to join the military, and specifically to join a combat unit, as opposed to a sort of rear base unit. And so they didn't debate the war particularly. And so our film, which is really striving for realism and immediacy, doesn't tackle those issues. We felt like that was exactly the film we wanted to make.
You know, and I just add that Sebastian and I have covered wars and conflicts for the last 10, 15 years, you know, often from a civilian human rights perspective, you know, all around the world. And I think if we all said, like, okay, who here doesn't agree with war, we'd all put our hands up. And I just felt that, you know, one of the issues, I mean, I'm a Brit, so why trust my political views about Americans at war? But you know, one of the things that in my mind, in our mind, when we were making the film, was this. I had an image in my head, and it was of meat going through a grinder. And I think whichever side of the divide you, far left, far right, whatever it is, you can agree that war puts people through the grinder. And I think that the men's faces when they just look at you without saying anything says more than any political polemic ever could.
I just don't like the way it is. I don't like how it feels right now.
I kill a bunch of bad guys. In the same instance, I'm killing 5 locals. I need to know better so that I'm not killing these people.
To me, one of the things that makes this film so special is just you guys are right there on the front lines with that troop and being in there. Can you just talk about the experiences of being there, like when guns are going off right by you, or you know you see action going on? Could you describe what it was like?
We, as Tim said, we've covered wars for a long time. My first experience in Afghanistan was actually 1996, during the Civil War when the Taliban were taking over. So we've been in combat before. I'd never been in combat with people that I grew to be very close to. And it was really interesting. I mean, fear is your enemy out there as a journalist. If your fear overcomes you, you put yourself in danger, you endanger everyone else. You really have to stay on top of it. And what I found was that as we got closer to those guys, trip after trip, we did a total of 10 trips between the two of us, sometimes together, sometimes apart. As we got closer and closer to them, my fear levels just dropped. And by trip 2 or 3, I felt so much a part of that unit that I wasn't scared, but it was just a sense of kind of shared fate. Like, okay, bad things might or might not happen, but we're all here together. And that was an incredibly comforting thought. And so that made some sort of emotional room, some psychic room in my head to actually do my job, which was to shoot video and record the rather incredible circumstances that we were witness to out there.
25 October 2007 during support of Operation Enduring Freedom, while assigned as a squad leader in Battle Company, 2nd Battalion, 503rd Infantry. His unwavering courage, aggressiveness, tactical skills, and leadership under extreme enemy fire were decisive in his platoon achieving fire superiority and defeating an enemy near ambush. Staff Sergeant Gallardo's performance of duty in a combat zone. Private First Class Cortez's performance. Specialist Rogers performance. Sergeant Benjamin Roberson for wounds received in action. Sergeant Andrew Regal. Staff Sergeant McDonough's unwavering courage, aggressiveness, and leadership reflects great credit upon himself, the Rock Battalion, the Bayonet Brigade Combat Team, Combined Joint Task Force 82, and the United States Army.
It seems when as the film progresses, it really starts to center on a core group of people that you guys seem to, that worked on the interviews after. Did you have more subjects to begin with at start, and then you just started to focus on these particular people, or was it always these were the guys that you latched onto?
Well, I mean, there were a number of editorial choices that kind of just made us focus in the end on who it was. I mean, first off, we focused on, we wanted to create the most visceral and immersive war film we could. So first off, we focused it on the outposts at Restrepo. So immediately we're down to a platoon of soldiers. And we just wanted everything to be of their experience. You know, we didn't want to kind of, you know, interview generals or politicians. We wanted to give you that illusion that narrative film brings to you, that you're actually in that scene when it's happening. Like you're in the car chase or you're in the bank. I mean, Hollywood films have narrative films make you feel as if you're there. That's their power. And we wanted to bring that to documentary. And so, you know, so we were kind of whittling it down to, okay, it's all in the valley. We're not going home with them, these soldiers, when they go on leave. We're not going to go and talk to, you know, to a general about why they're there or take the big picture. And obviously, but we got up to Restrepo, and it was, I mean, in some ways, Hollywood casting couldn't come up with a more kind of varied and interesting set of guys who really were very different from the kind of stereotypes that I'd had in mind. And that was my first time being embedded with US forces. I mean, from Pemble with the hippie mother to, you know, to Hiar, who's kind of very eloquent, and yet also you get a feeling of a very kind of sensitive as well. And to Kearney, you know, this kind of 26-year-old guy who's having to lead 160 men and just wants to get them all out alive. And you know, I guess in the end we just gravitated to those men who you know, who could express themselves as well. And you know, Pemble just sometimes in a very quiet way, sometimes in a more expressive way. But in the keeping, I mean, what we did was we tried a lot of different things when we came to edit the material together. And we tried some things with like, oh, that's a really clever way of doing the edit and telling the story. And in the end, we just, the rule of thumb in the edit was, does this reflect our experience? Is this true and honest to what we experienced out there? And in the end, we decided that the simplest structure, narrative structure, was just to go into the valley with the guys and come out with them at the end. So we paid more attention to the whole emotional arc of the film. And we really felt that that's where the core of the narrative lies, to take you on this emotional journey rather than kind of give you a kind of, often documentaries sometimes just give you a more of a kind of informational lecture about a situation. And in doing that, when we decided like, oh, how are we gonna, we need to get some, we didn't want to have, you know, Morgan Freeman narrating like you are now in the Congo Valley, because that would destroy the illusion you were there. So when we went to Italy 3 months after they came back, and we turned up in Italy, and we weren't the company shrink, and we weren't, you know, General so-and-so, we weren't the military authority figures, we weren't their families to whom they had such difficulty sometimes expressing what had happened out there. And so when we got to Italy and did the interviews, they just kind of opened up in this, we were friends that had been through these experiences with them. And so the emotional depth of those interviews was quite incredible. It was really like, took us totally back. I mean, it was very intensive, and we interviewed just the guys we thought that would just come out, who we'd followed a little bit, and we felt that they were the ones who could really give us that range.